Hello, creeps. How you doing on this lovely Monday? What is it? August 27th. We're almost getting into September territory. Just a little housekeeping. If you haven't noticed yet that we here at Horrid Lore have a podcast up. So, you can pretty much check everywhere except for we're not on Spotify yet because you need 5 episodes up before you get on Spotify. So look us up anywhere on iTunes, Podcatcher, Stitcher. Look us up, find our podcast. We got an episode up right now from last week about the Venture Brothers, from where we were in the beginning until where we are right now. So if you want to hear that before this, then we got that up on the channel too. So you can go check that out first if you'd like to. We put one up yesterday, too, that was the inaugural story of Conan the Barbarian, the Phoenix on the Sword. We got that on the channel here, too, but it's all broken up into parts. So if you want to hear that all together, go on to our podcast and download both those first 2 episodes. And there's going to be a new episode up tomorrow about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So that'll probably be up here, too, on our channel, too. We'll see if I can get that figured out. Well, I know I said that it probably wouldn't happen, but since you creeps have been so fucking kind on our little venture videos, I'm back here for more. Last night, we were finally reinserted back into the Venture universe, which is a very grounded universe, and we didn't really see that in the beginning of the season. I saw a couple of you commenting saying maybe they opened up a little bit too big, but the way that I think you should think about it is they just didn't have the money for that to be the finale of Season 6. So what we got, that Morphic trilogy, was essentially the finale of Season 6, and what we got last night was essentially the premiere of Season 7. So like I said, we're back in the Ventureverse, starting up pretty much fresh. Like I said, after 3 weeks of mind-boggling stories, jam-packed with revelations, we arrived back here in the territory of amazing jokes and steadily growth of a new story arc. Like I said, Season 7. But I'll get more into that later. Let's start from the start, or I guess kind of, because we get a title card that states 2 months later. But forget about that. We finally get to see the Monarch is back as the Mighty Monarch, and he's robbing a Ventec cargo ship with number 21, who are both sporting some sexy, sexy new regalia. They both have some awesome, cybernetic suits on. They're awesome. They have some serious firepower, like I said, and a veritable army behind them. Before I can get too excited, or you can get too excited, and unless you hate the Monarch, and if you do, you got some fucking nerve being here. Keep in mind it opened with the 2 months later thing. So, after this is over, we get the Monarch in the present who is seemingly fantasizing about this, but it happens in the future, I think, so I'm not really certain what's going on. But anyway, he's actually being audited by Dr. Z to reassess his position in the guild after everything that has happened over the past several months happened. And after all that, he's given a disappointing 5 out of 10 ranking in the guild, which is as embarrassing as it sounds. I failed to mention in my recap that the Mighty Monarch had fallen from grace hard since the fall of the original guilds. He used to have an enormous army of henchmen and a giant hovering cocoon, and now he has a handful of migrant workers as his henchmen and an inflatable flying fortress. So he is forced to seriously reevaluate his situation. Alright, but back on the venture front, Hank has cleaned out Dean's room since he's moved away to college, and asked Serena to come by and make some time with him in his brand new room. But she's starting classes as well as arriving on campus just as Dino is being dropped off by Brock, who jokingly offers him his car, the orange muscle car Adrian, just before leaving Dean with his new roommate, a familiar face in the shape of Jared, aka Brown Widow, the Ventureverse's answer to Spider-Man. And just before Brock leaves them, he warns Dean that his dad signed him up for several super science classes behind his back, because that is the opposite of what Dean wants to get into. We now cut to Rusty in the Ventec boardroom, where he just jumps out the window and saves himself, though, with the hover belt that his brother used to wear because he was so short, and that's how he got around. And he gleefully declares that it would put them back on the map and start making them money again, before he passes out due to the massive blood loss from the cuts he got jumping out the window. Now we cut back to the Monarch and 21 at the bank attempting to take out $20 million from Monarch's trust fund, which, it turns out, has run dry from the massive renovations he's done to his house, putting the mighty Malcolm in a state of severe crisis. He attempts to rob the bank, but is very quickly and embarrassingly again foiled by the Brown Widow, who is apparently also in the bank. We cut back to the university where Tosh Tompkins is taking over for Think Tank, who's still in the coma from fighting Brock in the last season. So now Tosh Tompkins is teaching his philosophy class with a little help from visiting professor Mr. Zack Snyder by showing them 300. Dean now meets up with Serena, who doesn't know how to feel when she's being overly friendly to him. Now back to Rusty, who wakes up in the hospital with Hank and Brock there to visit him. But he's only asking for Dean, which seems to hurt Hank very badly, leaving him desperate to make his own money to show Serena a good time, because she's the only one that it seems like that is really making time just for Hank, in the words of Enrico Matazza. Do I sense some tension brewing here between the titular Venture brothers? I don't know. Let's see as we move along. Back at the Monarch Manor, Dr. Girlfriend is returning home and gives her man a seriously good pep talk and inspires Malcolm to take some shit work that he really doesn't want to do to try and pull himself back up by the bootstraps. Something that Monarch has never done before, no matter how mighty he is. He's never kind of gotten things done for himself. Cut back to the campus where Dean is meeting with his advisor, Dr. Von Helping, who is imploring him to study sciences that interest him to make the world a better place like he did. Because he can commiserate. His father being Viggo Von Helping, who was one of the best archvillains in guild history. This sways Dean to accept his professor's offer. Back at Ventec, Hank is renting out Dean's room to a German couple for the night for his new business model, Airbnb. Brand new business model. No one had ever thought of anything remotely like it. And uses the money to try and take Serena out, but she still has a night class to go to, leaving Hank all alone with a pocket full of money. Now back over the city in the Monarch Mobile, 21 and Malcolm are on their way to arch their new target, who turns out to be Dr. Von Helping, whose class Dean and Serena are both in together alone. Until Monarch and 21 bust in through the window together, and they are very pleasantly surprised to see that Dean Venture is there. Now back at the hospital, Hank is visiting after he's got nothing left to do, giving a very heartfelt statement to his sleeping father, only to get a drug-addled, very disappointing response. Only proving that Dean is at the top of everyone's list and the number one commodity in Hank's eyes. Back at the building, Brock and Hatred both notice that the intruders are staying in Hank's old room and blindly assault them, leaving me to believe that we will no longer be hearing about Hank's Airbnb anymore, since I don't think we'll be seeing the German couple anymore. Back on campus, the Monarch is attempting to threaten Von Helping for anything of value he may possess. He says that there is nothing there and that he won't fight either of them, leaving 21 and Monarch very pumped in their attempt to pummel him, only to realize that he's made of some kind of thick, heavy-ass steel. And once they put Serena in danger, despite the fact that he's Wide Whale's daughter, we now see the real Von Helping. His skin melts away until he's hovering over them in like a Silver Surfer or Metallo-like entity, raining fire down upon the Monarch and 21. Dean has had enough of this in his life and stands between his father's nemesis and his professor. He offers the Monarch $1 million to stay out of his fucking life. Something the desperate Monarch gladfully accepts, being in such serious need of cash, obviously. Something Von Helping is very proud of after losing his cool and completely goes back to being his cool, hippy-dippy self. Serena is also very impressed with Dean's sincerity and bravery, and she gives Dean a little quick smooch for his heroic behavior. And we close off with a shot of a big old stiffy popping up Dino's pants like a pop tent. And we have a problem, creeps. Like I said before, I think we got some trouble brewing in the Venture household between the titular Venture brothers, the twins. We got some trouble in paradise between the newly rich boys, which is very exciting. I'm glad that we're down to this like the grassroots basics of the Ventures, and now we're ready to start something fun and new again, and I'm totally ready for it. And I hope you are too, creeps, because this is really fun to talk to you guys about, and I just can't wait until next Sunday. And I hope you can either. Hope you can't wait for tomorrow either, where our new podcast is going to be coming out about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and mainly kind of Dennis Hopper's wild behavior in the 70s and 80s. Well, I hope you rejoin me again tomorrow. Until then, love you, creeps. Welcome back, creeps, to another one of Dr. Lawrence Fugit's Venture videos here at Horrid Lore. Let me start off again this week by thanking you, creeps, for your support of these videos. A lot of you have been putting some theories in the comments, and they're very intriguing. Namely the one involving Hank becoming a villain who will ultimately arch Dean to complement the idea that Rusty and Monarch, or Malcolm, are also brothers, Venture brothers. And this could be Hank carrying on the family tradition started by his Uncle Malcolm. Who knows? I think it's very cool that all of you guys are putting your theories on here. It gives me a great perspective. It's very exciting that we can all share this together. I'm glad that I started doing this because it's a nice little collective with you creeps that we can all kind of put our heads together on what the fuck is going on, because this is a show that gives us so many little Easter eggs that in the beginning of the season have proved to mean a lot more than we think. Alright, well, let's get into this week's. This week's episode, it didn't really particularly give us any direct links to what I was just talking about in our theories, but we are certainly given a lot to chew over and process this week, regardless. In this newest installment, The Inamorata Consequence begins with the Ventures and Brock riding a Jeep through a very familiar country road, which the initiated will remember leads us to the old Venture compound. They're soon ambushed by a group of OSI agents in hazmat suits, who greet Brock with guns, but don't shoot him, so I guess it's kind of cordial. They remove their helmets and reveal that the leader is none other than General Hunter Gathers. They have convened at the old home of Jonas Venture for a summit to commemorate the treaty he drew up between the Guild and the OSI so many years ago. So the ruined compound is filled with all of our favorite members of each group, from Shore Leave to Phantom Limb, who, I must add, got a sexy new makeover. If you haven't seen it, you gotta check it out. To one of my favorite unsung characters from the OSI, one Snoopy. As well as the mysterious OSI woman and guild cyborg who fell in love in the last season finale. I don't know if you remember that. They're on the building with sniper rifles across from the new Ventec building. And they play a rather meatier role this time around. So the second summit of the Treaty of Tolerance soon begins with an introductory speech given by Rusty, who is reading pretty much just a retouched version of his father's original speech from the first summit. Hank is in the background, grown impatient and bored, when a masked OSI agent grabs him by the arm and whisks him out of the room. As he's carrying Hank back to the old hangar, it becomes more and more obvious who the mysterious soldier is. And before he even takes the helmet off, Hank, and I'm guessing all of us, are able to figure out that we are finally getting reintroduced to Dermot Fichtel for the first time since Season 5. I don't know about you, but this got me just about as excited as it seemed Hank was. I missed Dermot immensely. While all of this is going on, Dean is wandering through the woods to find old Ben's cabin, who, I don't know if I mentioned this in my recap, but who was the man that created the boys' clones along with Jonas Sr. And he clued Dean in on the fact that he was a clone. But Ben isn't home. He's left his red helper robot behind to mind the house, who is voiced by the always amazing New Zealander Rhys Darby. If you've never seen any of his stuff, then I would definitely recommend searching him up on IMDb. He's a very funny guy. And as opposed to their helper, this one has a full vocabulary. And he shows Dean a quick film on the history of the helper robots, which apparently were invented by Jonas Sr. and were quite popular around the world for a while because they were basically just nannies that you didn't have to pay. You pay one lump sum and you got a nanny forever. Until there was an accident in which a baby was killed and the helpers were seen, obviously, as monsters and were all destroyed in one single fell swoop. Forgotten like so many Tamagotchi pets. All except for Ben's and Jonas's, who was one of the prototypes and not as intelligent as the later models, which explains why he's so kind of primitive and jumpy. Like, Helper is definitely smart in a very innate sense, but I don't know, it's like a Chewbacca deal. Like, you really can't put your finger on exactly what he's thinking, but you can tell that he knows what's going on. Anyway, I digress. Cut back to the summit where Rusty is doing his best to mediate the myriad disagreements between the Guild and OSI, which seem almost fucking endless. So Phantom Limb and Shore Leave eventually have to settle their dispute through a duel, but a very different kind of duel than you'd be picturing. It was one created by Jonas Sr. at the first summit to settle arguments. The two men would put on scuba flippers on their hands and floaty donuts around their waist, and then they'd have a fucking slap fight. Which probably worked a lot better when the compound had a pool, I'd assume. Cut back to the hangar where Hank and Dermot are climbing a mountain of clothes and other garbage left behind in the move. As they are talking, Dermot reveals that he was fast-tracked to the OSI by a quote-unquote relative who did him a favor if he never said that they were related. Which Dermot quickly covers up so Hank doesn't really follow up on it. So, I I don't know if I said this in the recap either, but just to retouch on it. This means that Dermot must know that his mother was in fact the president of the Rusty Venture fan club, and that the two had a relationship when she was a minor, leaving his grandmother to raise him as her own son, and his real biological mother, Nikki, the president of the Rusty Venture fan club, to be played off as his sister to avoid any sort of scandal. Now, I know some people who had to live their lives like this, and it is quite a traumatic life to live. So I'm very happy that old Dermot has finally been cut a break and is beginning to find his way in the world. Back at old Ben's cabin, Dean is showing Red Helper some videos of his helper, asking why the Red Helper is so much more intelligent than he is, to which he responded that Ben had upgraded him to be part human, dropping that Dean is very similar in that sense, but soon tries to cover it up like Dermot did in this last scene, because he thinks that Dean is unaware of the fact that he's a clone. But Dean obviously knows from his last visit with Ben, and Red Helper describes them both as products of immense guilt from great men that allowed them a second chance at life. Something that Dean has never really pondered over. He's kind of just wallowed in this fact that he's a freak! But back at the hangar, the two interagency lovers show up thinking that they are meeting in secret and begin to unfurl a plan to kill everyone at the summit, until Hank pops up dressed like David Cassidy and rides down to them on his magic dragon to stop them, which obviously turns out to be a fantasy. In reality, the two lovers are just getting busy in a pile of the fucking miscellaneous trash in this hangar. And the two young men are watching with binoculars on their taller pile of miscellaneous trash, giving each other a blow-by-blow action as they're sharing the binoculars. Cut back to the summit, where we are getting into another heated argument where Hunter has dropped a Ventureverse slur, calling the guild bad guys, leading to extreme outrage. Seeing as how the term good guy and bad guy are this show's equivalent of racial profiling, this explodes just as much of, if not more, than you'd imagine that it would. Alright, well, back in the woods, Dean is attempting to bring Red Helper back with him, but the new helper can't go through with it. The human programming in his mind has left him shell-shocked and terrified to go out into the real world in fear of persecution. And back at the house, or the cabin, Red Helper bids farewell to Dean, telling him that he has far more of a chance in the real world since he looks normal on the outside. He's not a pariah like he is since he's a helper robot. Giving Dean a very new frame of mind on what it means to be a clone, that he's pretty fucking lucky. But before this is fully able to sink in, Red Helper bids farewell, but does not say farewell Dean. He says farewell Rusty. So maybe Hank and Dean aren't the only Venture clones after all. Maybe the clones were just a ploy to keep Jonas Venture alive forever, and it just stopped working after the Gargantua 1 disaster when he died. Who knows, because he was clearly very interested in keeping himself alive, and I think the clones... I don't know, maybe I just watched Hereditary too recently, and I'm thinking too much about soul swaps, and this is all out of nowhere, but... let me know in the comments. Like I said, I'm very excited to see what you guys think of all these little pieces we're getting. Alright, cut back to the summit where the childish squabbling is still ensuing, to an even more juvenile point than ever, until Rusty finally loses all patience and admits that he understands why his father treated them like children at the original summit. Because they were nothing but a bunch of bickering babies. And being a bad father to them was the only way he knew how to react. Because he was such a fucking subpar dad. And as we see, maybe Rusty is a little bit more of a well-rounded and developed and understanding as a parent, even though he's clearly not a perfect dad, as we've seen through these past 6.5 seasons. Speaking of fairness, like the Tooth Fairy, something only children believe in. Once you're an adult, you realize that fairness is bullshit. And this puts things into extreme perspective, and finally gets both sides to the point where they realize that re-signing the treaty is the only reasonable outcome that they can have. Alright, now we gotta trace back to the Romeo and Juliet-esque romance culminating in the hangar, which I know I kind of fucking cut out there, but I wanted to put it all together here with what we got in the final after-credits scene. Because the OSI female is heard outraged finding PP on the Cybernetic Guild agent's belt, and we obviously assume she's referring to piss on his belt and is grossed out. But in the end, in this after-credits scene, the astute Dr. Girlfriend puts 2 and 2 together, realizing that his belt has the literal initials PP on it, meaning that he is part of the Peril Partnership. The guild has a fox in the henhouse. And I, for one, cannot wait to see how this turns out. Again, I am very, very excited for next Sunday to roll around, and I cannot wait to share it with you creeps. And I hope you're just excited. And I hope you're just excited for tomorrow, because my new podcast is going to be coming out, where I'm going to be discussing a very horrible movie that you shouldn't be seeing, and a movie that everybody thinks is very horrible. And the main topic is going to be puppets. So take a wild guess what it's going to be about. Until then, love you creeps. Doc out. Salutations creeps. Doc back at ya for another shitty Monday. But hopefully whenever you're listening to this, I'll be cheering you up, even if it isn't Monday. Because I'm back here again for another fun-filled venture video. A little housekeeping to begin with. Something that was pointed out to me by Man Ray of Hope 23, that I was indeed incorrect in one aspect of my recap, that Dr. Mrs. the Monarch did not sleep with Wide Whale. Instead, she offered another possible resolution. That's how he joins the Council of 13, not just because he's a number one and she wants him. And she leverages other New York Guild members to support the new council, and he gets sole arching rights to Dr. Ventures. That's why she said she had bad news for the Monarch at the end of the episode. So I was indeed incorrect about them having sex. I thought that both happened. So thank you, Manta Ray, for proving that I can't even do this properly. Alright, well, with that out of the way, let's talk about last night's episode, The Bellicose Proxy, in which we get a story pretty small in scale, but plenty more background information on the operations, goings-on of the Guild and OSI, and continue with the mystery of this Peril Partnership, whatever the fuck that is. We open at Guild Strategic Operations Center. Watch and Ward, the two poster boys for the Guild, are taking Monarch and 21 on a little tour through the building, showing them all of the testing rooms and experiments being tested to put out in the field, including a man who's been cosmetically altered to look like Dave Grohl. Because, I mean, no one can say no to him. I mean, he got a Beatle and King Diamond to be in his band. You get that, asshole. Gary and Malcolm have come to find a way to up their guild level with the least shitty job they could possibly find. To which Watch and Ward suggest the Big Villain program, much like the Big Brother, Big Sister program. So it's like more experienced arches teaching new villains how to do their job properly. They accept because their little villain would be none other than St. Cloud, which would allow them to arch Billy and Pete, who also live at the Ventec building. On the other side of the wall, across from a one-way mirror, Dr. Girlfriend is talking to that cybernetic mole from the Peril Partnership, attempting to get him to become a double agent. Something he's more than willing to do, because otherwise he would be charged with treason, and that would end in some pretty gnarly guild torture. So now it's like a double negative. He was a mole, he was a double agent for the Peril Partnership, and now he's going back and he's a double agent. Cut to 21 and Monarch, who are on the X2 to finally meet Augustus St. Cloud. They're a lot more excited about the craft and the memorabilia board than when the tubby rich weirdo who is once again wearing his Goldfinger beach attire he first wore in the Season 5 classic Spanakopita. They realize just who exactly their little pudgy villain was going to be, and the two are obviously less than thrilled at the prospect. And back at the Ventec building, Rusty has arrived in Billy and Pete's lab with breakfast and finds the two hiding and cowering because they had just received their first arching notice from St. Cloud. Something Rusty assures them is standard practice and really nothing to worry about at all, since a Cloud is a pitiful, low level 1 arch. And then when they still will not believe him, Rusty has to use his watch to radio into Brock to give him the same question, and all Brock can really do is laugh, which kind of goes to show how low on the totem pole St. Cloud is. And I guess in the same token, it goes to show how low on the totem pole Billy and Pete are. Back with Dr. Girlfriend, who has the paperwork all drawn up for the cybernetic man, who I've noticed a lot of you mentioning may indeed be similar to Venturstein. I don't know, I guess only time will tell with that one, because they do put a lot of little Easter eggs in there like that, but who knows if it'll come to fruition. Anyway, Dr. Z storms in and begins playing bad cop because he's apparently in the wrong interrogation room. The cybernetic man signs the paperwork, and Doctors Z and Girlfriend promise to help with his OSI love interest. But first Z says that he would need a makeover to establish his cover and get we get a wonderful outfit montage, but it ends up merely being a fantasy of Dr. Z's, and the two of them say that they're not going to be doing that. Back on the X2, St. Cloud unveils his costume to Monarch and 21, who are worried that he has no ability to inflict any form of damage, since his only actual ability lies in being able to afford anything he wants, without actually having a menacing bone in his fucking body. So Monarch attempts to do the best he can with what they have and orders St. Cloud some clouds of laughing gas. Cut back to the Ventec building where Pete and Billy are being trained by Brock to keep themselves safe, which they are failing at miserably. This confrontation is going to be pretty embarrassing, creeps. On a rooftop tennis court, Monarch and 21 are attempting to run St. Cloud through the motions with his evil entrance from the fog, but are having just as much trouble as Brock and Rusty are. Both groups working so hard at this task so that they won't be embarrassed through their students of each other. Back at Guild headquarters, Watch and Ward are hacking into the OSI databanks to find information on the cybernetic man's love interest, who just so happens to be watching over a level 1 arching that day, and take a wild guess who it's involving. So they switch over the weapons from a level 1 to a level 6 to invoke an infraction to enforce her to come out into the scene. Cut to Billy's mother's house, where Colonel Gentleman is reading a book, and St. Cloud awkwardly smashes through the window, stating that he is there to bust things up and chew bubblegum, and finds bubblegum unpleasant. Billy's mother comes in to see what all the commotion's about, and once she realizes why St. Cloud's there, she pummels him. Over at the Ventec building, PY is in St. Cloud's helicopter, misting out a gas to make a threatening message, much like the one in The Wizard of Oz. Because St. Cloud has just received his souped-up ray gun from Watch and Ward. It's showtime. In front of the Ventec building, the gas has covered the whole area, and the disembodied, amplified voice of St. Cloud comes from within, beckoning Billy and Pete, who had to rent costumes at the last minute and look fucking ridiculous. The ray goes off from inside the cloud and levels a gigantic statue of Jonas Sr., leaving Billy and Pete no choice but to come out and face him. St. Cloud then takes out his super gas and throws it at Billy and Pete, but clumsily flipped his cape over his head, so all three of them are hit by the green laughing gas. After the statue snafu, the OSI woman finds Dr. Girlfriend in the cybernetic man and immediately understands, telling him that she meant what she said about him and the Peril partnership. But Dr. Girlfriend has no patience for this, and she seems just about done with the cybernetic man and her, and attempts to help him and help herself by losing her patience and telling her that the cybernetic man is a double agent. So perhaps there is still some hope for our star-crossed lovers. And in the end, we get Billy and Pete telling the story of their arching like 15-year-olds to Hank and Dean. Because they hallucinated it like it was some fucking ridiculous thing. Like, Pete was convinced that he was whooping the shit out of him like fucking like Robert De Niro and Pesci in that scene in Goodfellas where they were stomping the guy. I think he actually says that. Yeah, go get your shine box, St. Cloud. Oh man, another great episode. Small in scale, but we are definitely building up towards something. Monarch's making his way on his own. Very proud of him, and I don't know, it seems like we're actually going to get a season finale this season. Let's just wait and see. Because, I mean, if you'll remember, we did see a few weeks back that flash forward, that weird thing that they started the episode with, where the Monarch had that insane suit, 21 had that insane suit, they had that insane fucking ridiculous army with them robbing the venture ship. I think that there's a good chance that that's where we're going to end up by the finale this season, because it seems like we're definitely building forward in that. Like I said, the Monarch is a man of he's finally off on his own, just like Dr. Girlfriend is finally. He's in the middle of that transitionary period, and she's kind of gone through it, but it looks like he's going to be off on the other side if that 2 months later flash forward is any hearkening of what's to come, because it seemed like he's at least level 7 or an 8 with all of those fucking wonderful toys. And we didn't really get anything in this episode about the Dean and Hank wedge that seems to be amplifying now that Dean is away at college with Hank's girlfriend and Hank is not there. But I guess we're going to have to wait until next week to figure out anything else about that. Until then, creeps, tomorrow is going to be a new episode of the podcast coming out where I talk about The Nun and the 60th anniversary of The Blob. So I don't think you're going to want to miss out on that. I guess maybe I'll talk to you tomorrow. And if not, until I see you again, creeps, stay safe, take it easy, Doc out.
Hola, creeps. It's Jesse the Body Ventura here taking over for Doc Fugit today. He didn't have me on for the Predator episode of the podcast, so your governor, Jesse the Body Ventura, is here instead of your stupid fucking adventure brother gimmick television show. I'm here to talk about handguns.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just really upset that I really didn't get to do my
Jesse the Body Ventura
in our episode that's coming out tomorrow about Predator. But hey, you just got it a little bit early, actually, a little sneak peek. I got everybody except for him, and I was pretty upset about it. All right, well, back again, creeps. Welcome back for another Venture video. We're not going to be talking about handguns. Sadly, this might be one of the last installments, unless I come back and do a more thorough recap of the older episodes. I don't know. You're going to have to ask me for that. Tell me in the comments if you'd like to see that. Since the episode count has yet to be revealed, I do have a sneaking suspicion, though, that it's going to be 10 episodes tops, and we're at 7. And then we wait once more. They haven't announced that they have started Season 8 yet, but with all the careful work they've put in advancing the story so far since last season, I really think that there has to be some sort of endgame in mind. But I know we're going to probably have about 3 or 4 more years until we actually get more, unfortunately. Because for those who are complaining about the gap between 6 and 7, they literally had those made back to back. With their level of meticulous creative control, there's no way a season can be pumped out in under 2 years. And it's been proven. That's just for me saying you're going to have to prepare to wait again. And I'm ready to wait again. It's a good enough show that I'm committed enough to wait. Anyway, this week's episode is another amazing example of why this is one of the best shows ever and why you should be patient for it. With the usual insanely dense story and seemingly endless jokes perfectly fit into said jam-packed story. The opening scene of this episode, The Unicorn in Captivity, we see the result of what looks like months or at least weeks of work. And we get Rusty, Billy, and Pete finally have something that works, a fully functional teleportation device. After they're able to manage to send an apple through without rendering it into cubes or fucking whatever, a bunch of weird fly shit happened to it. And then they do the same thing with the pirate captain, unbeknownst to him, so they have a human test subject, and it worked. So Rusty and the others are ready to bring this public. And I mean, they're very excited because this is gonna etch them in stone in the history books and put Ventec back on the map and maybe finally get Rusty some kind of confidence boost. But if you're an initiated fan, you know that that's about as likely as pigs flying. So, while all this is happening, we find Monarch 21 and Dr. Girlfriend having some breakfast in their beautifully redecorated home, and we learn that Monarch's next attempt to climb back up the ranks of the guild is going to be by acting as a substitute in a group of other low-level criminals. A couple of them they've shown before, mainly Copycat, who's the leader. He's the Dean Martin knockoff guy who's able to make myriad duplicates of himself. We also get another very fun, brand new guild member, Presto Changeo, who is voiced by none other than Luke Skywalker and the Joker himself, Mark Hamill, who they're able to bring back into his Batman the Animated Series voice like they were able to get Kevin Conroy to do Captain Sunshine sound, it was a very reminiscent of his Batman voice. This is pretty reminiscent of Hamill's Joker voice. It's kind of different, though, because he has said that he had to retire the voice because it was just fucking destroying his vocal cords. The most mysterious out of all these cats is a guy named Driver X, who's another new one, but there is no voice. All he does is a little, that little salute that people do, like, the getaway driver. They don't really say anything, they just fucking salute. So meanwhile, Rusty is realizing what exactly the dummy corporation is that we were talking about in a couple episodes earlier, because he has told Brock that Rusty's back on top. Rusty's gonna get back on the map. But Brock takes him into a part of his own building that he is completely unaware of himself. And the Dummy Corp ends up, I think, it seems like it's some sort of fucking, like, Westworld facility where they're making, like, synthetic operatives. Anyway, Brock takes him to see General Hunter Gathers, who tells him he did a real great job with the teleporter, but there's no way he can put it out. It's too much for the world to handle. So tough break, Rusty. This one's too dangerous to go out in the real world. So Rusty is obviously arguing with him on this, as Hunter and Brock leave him in the room to simmer on what he's said and that he's denied listening to them. And all of a sudden we get some silhouettes pop up around him on screens, much like we had for the Council of 13 for the Guild of Calamitous Intent in past seasons until they were killed by the past Sovereign. But this is the OSI's version of like the Illuminati. Like I was very excited because Roy Brisby from season 1 was one of them, and he's always been one of my favorite characters, you see. But yeah, this is a really fun bit. Rusty ends up getting caught up in like the Illuminati, and like they tell him to like come to a party, and it ends up being at like I don't know if you're a fan of Eyes Wide Shut, but there's this family which is, I don't know, like linked in supposedly with the Illuminati and blah blah blah. They had all these parties back in the 70s, and in Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick copied this family's house, the Rothschilds, and a bunch of stuff that happened at these parties, and supposed he died like 3 days after the final cut of this movie was shown to people. So I mean, it's really not that much of a stretch that could have gotten him killed, because he literally died 3 days later and no one said anything about him being sick or anything. So the Venture Bros is doing the exact same thing, because this party that Rusty's going to looks exactly the same as this Eyes Wide Shut scene. The house looks exactly the same as the house in Eyes Wide Shut, which also if you look it up, looks exactly like the Rothschild's house. Do an image search on Google and it'll freak you the fuck out. And inside is a wild fuck party of all of the most like elite people in the world. I mean, a lot of people I've seen are very interested whether or not we're going to get an unedited version of this, because there is some wild fucking going on that had to get blurred out. And to answer that, I think that we're definitely going to get it, because I think, yeah, season 3 in the second episode with Dr. Killinger, where he's with Rusty, we see, I mean, it got blocked out on TV, but in the DVD you can see fucking Jonas Sr.'s cock. So I think it's pretty likely that we're going to see all the fucking at the fuck party. But, I mean, I don't know. These guys are so good at designing, like, human bodies that I'm honestly just, like, really interested to see it. Because even in, like, the little bits that they got to show of the bodies, it's like, Jesus Christ, these guys are like fucking Frank Frazetta. They know every single contour of a body. So while Rusty is there, he thinks that he's in, like, fucking Flint, and that he's just become part of the elite because of his discovery. But when he is taken into a back room where he is led to by none other than Dr. Girlfriend in a mask, and I mean, pretty obviously her. I mean, how would you mistake that voice and that haircut under a mask? So in that, they're inferring that Dr. Girlfriend has been groomed to fuck all of the most, like, wealthy men in the world, like people think Marilyn Monroe was, and blah blah blah. Like, that's what the whole message of Eyes Wide Shut was. So Rusty gets told to go and meet her in one of the back rooms at some point at whatever o'clock, and the whole group that was the silhouettes on the screen are there in masks, much like they were in Eyes Wide Shut, and Roy Brisby is indeed there. So what they do is they offer him an ultimatum rather than, you know, him thinking that he's just going to get laid. They tell him, you know, give us your idea and, you know, you're going to fuck Dr. Girlfriend's brains out. Or if you don't want to give it up, and a guy comes out with a humongous, like, disgusting, terrifying strap-on on. They said, you can take this up the ass. So, with us, it's either you fuck or you get fucked. What do you want to do? Leaving Rusty that ultimatum and leaving us on the brink of not knowing exactly what he's going to choose, because he already told the OSI he's not giving it up. But anyway, back in the heist that the Monarch is being forced to take part in, which matter-of-factly ends up being on the Ventec building, Sergeant Hatred and Brock are much more than ready to take on all of these fucking losers who are I mean, there's really no other way to say them. They're not the A team, they're the B team. So, I mean, it's not really worth getting sad over them, because, I mean, other than Presto Chango, who gets a knife to the face from Brock, sadly, and I'm pretty sure died, the rest of them were pretty disposable. It didn't really matter that, I mean, it's Brock. They're probably all dead, except for Copycat, who, like I said, with Driver X, we had no idea who that was. In the end, it turns out to just be an empty suit. So what the fuck's going on? Turns out that was Copycat's ace in the hole. Driver X was a copy of Copycat the whole time, and that's how he survived this whole thing, because he definitely had a good feeling that they were going to not succeed, and he just let everybody else pretty much die, except for the Monarch, who was smart enough to know not to fuck with Brock. So all of them died, except for Copycat, who had a pretty... I thought that was a pretty cool plan. But what was it that they were sent to steal? Does this have something to do maybe with that 2 months later thing that I've been talking about so much from episode 4, where the Monarch is fucking on top again, and he's robbing something off of the Ventec boat? Maybe that is what they were sent to steal, and Dr. Z sends the Monarch in to do it. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I think we're going to see by the end of the season. And as we always see in our post-credit scenes, everything's tied together in a nice little bow. And we see what Rusty's choice was in the ultimatum. He chose to fuck rather than be fucked. So he's having a great time while everybody's standing around him, getting ridden like a fucking wild dog by Dr. Girlfriend. And then we see Rusty inside of that same room he was in originally, where Hunter gathers and Brock left him, and he just has some VR goggles on and a giant like a suction thing over his penis. So so he's literally just like they're just saying it. This is all fake bullshit. I think that just goes to show how much credence they take into it's all Illuminati conspiracy. Illuminati conspiracy.
Yeah, I think that's a bunch of malarkey. Jesse Ventura here to close out the episode. I actually thought that this episode of the adventure program was very fun. Alright, well, until tomorrow, where Dr. Fugit will be talking about my film, Predator, and all of the other ones that came afterwards. I hope you, creeps, come back and enjoy it. Until then, this is Jesse the Body Ventura, signing out.
How's it going, creeps? Back again for another lovely Monday to speak with you about another wonderful episode of the Venture Brothers. This one entitled The Terminus Mandate, episode 8 of season 7. Alright, let's get right down to it, into brass tacks. The episode begins in an Italian restaurant where Dr. Girlfriend and Red Death have arrived in disguise to have a secret sit-down with a member of the Peril Partnership. Phantom Limb seems to have missed the memo since he's already seated inside in full arch regalia and is instantly told to change by Dr. Girlfriend and Red Death, who don't have to wait long for their guest, Blind Rage, to arrive, who tells them that the Peril Partnership is trying to take the guild for a ride and some bribe money, threatening to stir up some trouble if the guild doesn't comply to their demands, to which they have no patience or time. Telling the blind villain, who is hilariously voiced by Brendan Small, really nice to hear him have a little comeback. I tell him to fuck off outside of the restaurant, so he leaves. Meanwhile, Rusty is at the same restaurant at a table across the room with Night Dick. He laughed at the name. Who has dug up some dirt on a black widow named Novia, who Rusty's obviously interested in because it is assured that he'll have sex even if she would kill him, because he's apparently that desperate at this point. Because he hasn't had a woman since Hank's graduation. Alright, well, later on after this, in the asteroid base for the guild, most of the council members, not Dr. Girlfriend, vote to pay up to the Peril Partnership. But Red Death and, like I said, Dr. Girlfriend want none of that. Dr. Girlfriend then goes through the guild charter and discovers a rule the Sovereign ignored during his reign. That if you sit on the guild council, that you can't be an arching villain anymore. You have to kind of sit back and let everything do what it's going to do and kind of just supervise and clean up. So Ward and Watch appear with envelopes that contain everyone's final arch, and each are promised to be something very special. Dr. Z naturally gets Action Johnny, who's now in who's in a rehab center from his latest addiction in Florida. Phantom Limb goes off against Hunter Gathers, which literally ends up turning into a fucking dick measuring contest. And what might actually be one of my favorite... no, this one's not my favorite, but maybe second favorite. Radical Left goes against Far Right. So he's apparently... Radical Left and Far Right are two different villains that fucking split off from each other. So he spends his time fucking arching himself. And the way that he does it is by playing a game of Clue against himself. In a house that reminded me a lot of the place that Two-Face lived, his fucking hideout in Batman Forever. Because, I mean, well, I guess Radical Left and Far Right are both very Two-Face-like. So, this leads to my favorite one, the funniest, definitely funniest one, is Red Mantle and Dragoons arching. After an evening of eating some fucking like hungry man dinners and watching Downton Abbey on TiVo. And Lady Violet, you are such a delicious bitch, and you have my heart. Like, they have no fucking desire to go out arching anymore. They are like so old that like they won't even open it up because they're too afraid to like see what's going to fucking what they're gonna have to do. Because if you think about it, neither of them has done like anything. Like, they're not even seen like moving around really in any of the episodes. They're just like too old. So then finally, after they're done binging all this Downton Abbey, they learn with some great relief that all their former adversaries are dead. So they outlived everyone. So they have that to be happy about. And B, they don't have to fucking do anything. They can stay in and marathon some more Downton Abbey. So while all this is happening, Rusty is still trying his hardest to get Brock and the boys to help him practice his date with Novia so he can sleep with her without being killed. Oh, it was a lot like when they were training Billy and Pete a few episodes back so that they wouldn't get killed by St. Cloud, which obviously was not an issue. Okay, so most importantly to the story is the fact that Novia has her date with Rusty at the Ventec building, because Dr. Girlfriend is given Novia as her final arch, because when she was starting out as Lady Au Pair, she went up against Novia, who back then apparently was a wedding-themed hero and stopped Dr. Girlfriend and the Moppets from, what was it? I think it was the Hope Diamond that they were trying to steal. Dr. Girlfriend gets back into her old costume, and I'm sure to everyone's delight, rather than getting new Moppets, 21 goes as her Moppet proxy to go on this final arch. But she ends up finding herself so overcome with emotion when she sees how great her old enemy looks that she just like falls to fucking pieces, and she thinks that she can't arch her, but she ends up stealing her wallet, so I guess that does end up counting as an arch after all. But obviously it didn't proceed as planned. That said, not every council member agrees to fucking pack it all up and, stop being an arch, like such as Wide Whale, who finds that he has way too many long-standing grudges to retire himself as a villain, and we didn't actually see what decision Dr. Girlfriend makes, because the Monarch is very upset that she is hanging up the tights and that he's not going to be able to work with her anymore. Probably mostly because she's finally officially going to be his actual boss. But I guess we're going to get more of that in the finale. Figure all that out. See if Wide Whale sits on the table, if Dr. Girlfriend sits on the table. But this episode gave us so much in-depth insight into our fucking characters that made me afraid that it was going to be the finale. Oh man, I almost forgot to mention another amazing one with fucking Red Death's fucking final arch, which he completely ignores whoever the fuck it was that was inside. This is definitely going to lead up to the finale too, I think, with whatever is ramping up for the Peril Partnership. Because he just took the fucking envelope and whoever was in there and threw it away and just went straight for Blind Rage because he was being such a fucking arrogant prick earlier, and just fucking bashes him in the face. So when Blind Rage awakens, he is tied to a fucking train track, and then fucking Red Death delivers this amazing speech, because it's Clancy Brown that does his voice, fucking Kurgan, Mr. Krabs. Who could be better as Red Death? I think that's half the reason I love him so much. And his design is fucking amazing. But he gives this amazing speech about the gentleman villain of old. Like fucking Simon Legree, because he's, the guy would twiddle his mustache after tying the chick up to the railroad tracks like he's doing to Blind Rage right now. And he leaves him. He leaves him there saying, oh, is the train going to come on this track? Is it going to be the next track? Either way, I'll leave you. So, obviously, Blind Rage got ran over by a train, and that's a very clear message to be sent to the Peril Partnership that the Guild is not to be fucked with. I can't wait to see where this is going to lead to. Well, I know I didn't really mention much about Rusty's subplot and his date with Novia, because really the only thing that it really adds to in the overarching story of this episode, other than some good jokes, is the fact that Novia goes to the Ventec building, which is where Dr. Girlfriend fucking sees her and tells her she looks so good. I can't even do this. You look so good. So, like, it really, like, Rusty obviously doesn't get laid. He doesn't die. And I guess also in that it introduced Novia, who I think may play a part to come from here on out, because they showed her as that wedding-themed hero, and now she's turned to a Black Widow. So maybe there's something in that transition, that maybe there's some kind of a story in there. So, like I said, in the date story, it's not a super dense side story, but it's a charming and hilarious one nonetheless. Rusty doesn't get laid, and I mean, the most interesting new theory, I think, to speculate on is that Dr. Girlfriend is pregnant. Because at the top of the episode, Blind Rage mentions how her breasts are swelling and popping out, even though they weren't. Well, he's blind and was sensing it. And her emotional reaction to fucking Novi. You look so good, I can't even do this. So, I think that there's probably a good chance that she is with child, and I think that you'll probably agree with me on that one. Thankfully, we still have 2 more episodes left of what may be the best Venture Bros season thus far. And there are plenty more little threads which have been similarly hinted at, but ignored kind of in true Venture fashion, like I was mentioning before, the triangle between Triana, Dean, and Hank. We haven't gotten much on that. The Peril partnership, that's been steadily building up the last couple episodes, but we'll see. Unless we actually do finally get a finale where everything they've built up to is resolved, which definitely is a possibility, since there have been no mentions of any work being done on Season 8 thus far, meaning that they must have some form of closure at the end of this season if they don't know where they're going to go with the next one. But who knows? Maybe they're lying. But last season they said that 7 was going to already being made, and we didn't really get that finale, but we knew that 7 was being made, so I don't think that they're really going to leave us on too much of a cliffhanger, since they're not even saying that 8 is in production, at all. Well, I guess that's all I really got to say on this one, creeps. Until tomorrow, I hope you join me for my podcast episode on Panos Cosmatos. Be a nice, double feature on Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy. So I hope to see you then. If not, I guess I'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat place for another Venture video. Doc out, creeps. What's going on, creeps? Back again for another Monday, and I guess this one's got a little silver lining to it. Welcome back for another Venture video. Doc Fugit here, creeps. Sadly, we are here to discuss the penultimate episode of Season 7. And as I said, not sad because it was disappointing, but because it's such a it was such a good episode, and it's hard to accept that there's only one more episode left in this fucking arc. But all good things must come to an end. Nothing can last forever. Alright, so in this episode, the forecast manufacturer, we get our first snowstorm in the Ventureverse, and it's a doozy. Being from the Northeast, it was, in my estimation, very realistic depiction of a true, shitty nor'easter. Even though, as the title hints, the storm was created by man rather than by the natural atmosphere. The episode opens with at least 3 feet of snow surrounding the Ventec building, and Rusty telling Billy that's the perfect temperature to test his thermoregulation suppository. White apparently is absent because he was stricken with mono. So Billy is left with the task of shoving this thing that looks like a gigantic Christmas tree light up his ass to become the rectal Neil Armstrong. There's some form of alarm that keeps on beeping, so that leaves Rusty and Hank to go into the safe room while Brock, Hatred, and Billy, mainly Billy, are left to sweep the building. While Hank's inside the panic room, he's going a bit insane. A little stir-crazy, as we call it during a snowstorm, because he can't get in touch with his beau, Serena. Something that we are finally fucking getting back to, and it gets very juicy. Meanwhile, Billy finds the source of the beeping. It's an antique OSI telephone communique device. So it's the top brass. They're trying to get in touch with Rusty, and they're requesting his help to stop the weather machine, which is creating the blizzard. So Billy is the one that's all gung-ho about this. Everybody else is pretty blasé about the whole situation. And Rusty literally asks everyone except him to join him, and they all say no. Billy just finally he's had enough of this. He's Team Venture. So he demands that he go into X1 with Rusty, and they go tackle the menacing weather machine. Meanwhile, Monarch and 21 are recruited by Dr. Girlfriend for another facet of the same mission. On board a wooden ship, they sail through the Hudson, I believe. Dr. Z finally explains that the Peril Partnership is Canada's answer to the Guild. They have worked in peace with them for 60 years, apparently, but recently there's been a schism, and a rogue band of members have been committing acts of terror to become the most feared organization in the world. So there's a little bit of a puzzle piece connected there. And for some reason, the OSI is refusing to intervene. I wonder who could be at the bottom of all of this. I wonder if that's telling that the OSI won't intervene. Anyway, Dr. Z gets a message from the OSI that reads, "We will handle the symptom, and you handle the disease," explaining Rusty and Malcolm's tandem missions there. Rusty takes care of the immediate problem, while Monarch and 21 take care of the man behind the curtain, the creep, who's using stolen guild tech to do so, apparently. The only glimpse we are given so far is a chicken tender bust of his head, which they must eat with either ketchup or barbecue sauce, for there will be no record of this meeting. Back at the Ventec building, Hank is all done. He's leaving to brave the weather to find Serena, who he said he doesn't think has been ignoring him. He thinks she's been kidnapped or cloned or something like that, because he's left her 40 voicemails and 60 text messages. Yeah, that's gotta be the only answer, that she's... Poor Hank. So he goes out, and being Hank, he can't resist making a football out of snow and throwing it past himself. And unfortunately, upon diving for the quote-unquote ball, he smashes his head on a mailbox covered in snow, leaving a really, really, really bad gash and probably a really shitty concussion, because when he wakes up dazed and covered in snow himself, the infamous knife-wielding guy in a bear costume picks him up and carries him out in the storm towards something that he's not gonna like. In the sky, we get a really cool sequence where Billy and Rusty have found the weather machine. Billy is stripped down to his skivvies because the thermoregulator is working too well. So this allows him to hover down to the machine because he won't be freezing, with Jonas Jr.'s hover belt that's been used actually before already in this season. It's a pretty neat little gadget, isn't it? So, once he gets down there, he has to shit the thermal device into the weather machine, which he does, and it works, and destroys the fucking weather machine. But then it turns out that the brainwashed cybernetic ex-Peril Partnership spy, remember him? He was piloting the ship, or the machine. So he's outside asking them for help, and they end up taking him and the machine back to the guild. And he admits that he only took the mission to get the attention of the woman he loves in the OSI. More on that, too. We've got a lot of love threads going this season. I'm loving it. Very soap opera-ish. They're fully embracing that. I'm very happy about that. Meanwhile, Monarch and 21 are getting off the ship to swim to the Creep's island to pose as defectors, and once they gain the Creep's trust, to take him out and solve the problem with the Peril Partnership at long last. They reach the island and are greeted by a shrouded figure who is definitely on the Monarch's old butter glider, and definitely sounds like Jesse the Body Ventura. He tells them that they must survive the most dangerous game in order to defect. There is this really cool translucent dome that he makes them walk towards, which keeps his part of the island safe from the violent storm. And his section of the island is filled with myriad other objects that the Creep has apparently stolen from other members of the guild. We then finally get a good look at the Creep, and he's also covered in pieces of others' costumes from the guild. The only piece I could recognize for certain is that he has Galacticon's leg, or boot, or whatever. Anyway, he instructs them then on the most dangerous game, which turns out just to be lawn darts because they're banned all over the world. So they play Firebomb with it, where, the game where you throw the lawn... I don't know if you're old enough to remember actually having lawn darts, but they are very dangerous. But you just throw them up in the air and fucking run like hell. I've played it before. It's very stupid. While playing the game, he explains his gripe with the guilds, and it's simply their bureaucracy and miles of red tape, which we've seen plenty of in these last 2 seasons alone, let alone the whole show. Because there seems to be a lot more now that the Sovereign's not in command anymore. He wants to destroy it so that villainy can finally be what it was meant to be, once more. And his end game, apparently, is to destroy the OSI, who threw him out for murdering Boy Scouts. He thought he was securing the area for a mission. They shouldn't have been there. So, he truly believes that anyone could have made that mistake. So, the most dangerous game goes well into the night until Rusty and Billy, in these fucking, I think Rusty's in a tuxedo and Billy's dressed like Ulysses S. Grant, appear out of Grover Cleveland's presidential time machine, which he also has on the island, obviously. And very strangely, Rusty calls Monarch by his name Malcolm and asks why he's 1 trillion years in the past. I don't think they're going to say anything about this by the end of this season, but I think maybe that might have something to do with the series finale. Who knows? Maybe just a little hint that we are going to get a season 8. Anyway, These are not the same Billy and Rusty, obviously, who just stopped the weather machine, but before we can ponder any more, like I just said, too much more into this, the creep is killed because he's so fucking distracted by them, and Billy and Rusty disappear. The other Billy and Rusty. So, the Monarchy 21 win. And that's the end of the Peril Partnership, or is it? I guess we'll have to wait till the finale to see if that's really put to an end. And in the end of the episode, we get the bear, again, carrying Hank through. Now they're at the dormitory at Dean and Serena's school. And he puts him down and points to Dean's room, telling him to look inside, obviously, through just the point, because he doesn't speak. When he goes inside, he sees the both of them naked together on the bed. And poor Hank, he's too nice and pure to even assume the worst of them, and Dean has to basically spell it out for him before he collapses from both the shock and the blow to his head. I'm thinking maybe this will lead to a reemergence of Enrico Matazza after becoming so jaded from this betrayal. That would be very Hank, in my opinion. But the door is open with him in Wide Whale, so who knows, maybe he will do that to try and get like ultimate revenge on Serena. Maybe we'll get Bad Hank, Enrico Matazza. That would be very Hank again. And in the post-credit scene, in the annals of the guild headquarters, the cybernetic man and his lover are reunited, but his memory has been wiped, and he treats her as a threat, and the episode cuts out with him calling for security. So, I think we're going to get something big out of that in the finale. Obviously, same as always, they really don't explain much in the trailer for what's going to be happening in the next week, other than it seems like the guild is going to be coming for Rusty. Other than that, I guess we're going to have to wait and see another week. One more episode. It's very exciting, but very depressing. Well, I'll see you then, creeps. And next time I see you, there's going to be no more for a while. All right. Well, maybe you'll join me tomorrow. New podcast is coming out. New story time on Friday. And little treat for the month of October, which I'll be telling you about soon. All right. Doc out.
Hello creeps, welcome back for another Venture video. Sadly, going to be the last one for Season 7 because last night we got it, the finale, episode number 10, the Saffrax Protocol. Well, while this might have been the finale of the season, I can tell you that it won't be the finale of us joining together for one of these Venture videos, but let's start from the start. Back in the Unicorn in captivity, we got the story of the Monarch stealing the transporter from the Ventec building, and we never really got an answer of what the fuck that was for. Whether that was all just a bunch of sound and fury for nothing, but I guess it wasn't, because apparently he kept up his end of the bargain and continued being the good guild boy that he's become this season, because in the beginning of this episode number 10, a team of guild wasps use it to re-enter the Ventec building in order to take Rusty hostage for a very special purpose, which turns out to be a lot easier of a task than they'd expected it to be, with him drowsily walking into the back room that they're in before even the last guy has a chance to even make his way through the teleporter. So they're able to get their hands on him and don't even have to deal with Samson. What a wonderful deal that turned out to be. Or did it? Alright, so Rusty is then teleported to Meteor Major to be held for a very special ritual, as I said, which is being held for the Monarch and 21, who are finally being initiated as a level 10 and his number 2 at long last. After this whole very un-21 and Monarch season where they're acting very out of character, but in a good way, something is finally paying off in that sense. So, they must perform the trials of the original Arch and Hench, Saffrax, and Aletheus, who were real figures in Gothic history in the time of the Roman Empire. If you watched this and thought that this was all fictional, well, I don't know if the story that they told in it is their actual story, because it didn't really seem like they gave a concrete actual story of these two. They just said that Saffrax was the first man to hold a grudge for a living, and Aletheus was his sidekick. Yeah, unfortunately I'm not a history major, and it doesn't seem like there's too much about them on here. One of you will have to do this for us, I guess. So then, we go to a strange mixture of Empire Strikes Back and Barbarella, which is a land that Hank has dubbed Coma Town, where he's with his godfather, Action Man, who had a stroke at the end of the Morphic trilogy earlier on this season, if you don't remember that. That's why he's there. So Action Man believes that he is dead, apparently, and Hank tells him that he had the stroke, so he's in a coma with him. And Hank thinks that he's there because he saved Serena's life, but I don't know if he actually thinks that. That might just be his brain trying to give him a little bit, give him a little bit of some peace through all of this horror that he's just seen. So then Action Man returns the favor by telling Hank that he needs to grow up before returning to the land of the living, or he'll end up like his father, obsessing over any woman who gives him the slightest amount of attention. Telling Hank that he is indeed talking about his mother, who apparently was actually an actress named Bobby St. Simone, but that was before having her name changed and getting a restraining order against Rusty because he got a little bit too obsessive. I don't know. I guess that's something that we're going to have to just hold our breath for, because there's definitely nothing so far about Bobby St. Simone other than the fact that it was Jimmy Schmitz's character's name in NYPD Blue. So while all this strange yet very cathartic shit is unwinding, we finally get something else that's very cathartic, because we have not seen it in a very long time. We get to see Brock Samson go full Swiss murder machine for the first time in probably about 4 seasons. Like, I think it was probably the end of the 3rd season when the assassins got sent by the OSI to take him out. I think that was the last time we really got to see him get a murder boner like this. He just completely dismantles the team of wasps that gets sent to watch the perimeter while the ritual is going on and while Rusty is on Meteor Major. But Brock just keeps on killing them and sending them back through the teleporter with notes attached to them saying, "Send Doc back." So they really don't have too much of a choice by the end. So meanwhile, during the performance/ritual, 21 is offered a position as a full arch, being able to start off as a level 4, which is pretty low, but it was just last season that the Monarch himself was there at level 4, so Gary could definitely build himself up pretty easily. And while this is happening, the Monarch is given a non-prop sword to destroy his true enemy. And then it is revealed why Rusty is there. He is behind a curtain, bound and gagged for the Monarch to, have his way with. Which he actually spurns the invitation to do, because the Monarch has had enough of all this bureaucratic bullshit. He's gone this far only to get to his day of triumph, only to get some more weird red tape and bullshit to accompany what is supposed to be something that is both exciting and, like I said, triumphant for him. And they're kind of ruining it for him by both sandbagging him by making his number 2 a full arch, and by, kind of destroying his whole purpose of wanting to be an arch, so he can arch anyone and fulfill his life's destiny of making Rusty miserable. And if he kills him, how can he do that? And this is a feeling which is shared by his hench. Neither of them wanting to break their partnership, which has solidified like a diamond over these past 3 seasons, beginning with Gary wanting to go off and become a hero of sorts on his own, and then realizing that really isn't the life that he wants. And after the Monarch is trying to kind of get his footing after losing Dr. Girlfriend as his number 2, they've both kind of been wandering a bit, losing their footing, catching their footing, and finally ending with their killing the Creep at the end of the last episode, which was probably the biggest thing anyone in the guild's done, other than the Sovereign being overthrown. But then after all of this, when they spurn both of these things, it just turns out that it's just proving how strong their bond has become, and that this was merely the final test, which the two of them have passed with flying colors. So, the Monarch and 21, Malcolm and Gary, are officially a level 10 arch and his number 2. So, that's something that I think is very exciting, because, the Monarch, he was always so cool, but it was always in a jokey, funny kind of way, in that he was a failure and a loser. And now that he realized that he had to kind of actually pick himself up by his bootstraps, no more trust fund, no more girlfriend to make him look good, and save the day when he fucks everything up, he's got to do it for real. And he finally has. Okay, so while Hank is in his and Action Man's coma town, Dean is sitting over him, reading off a list of why he's a crap brother. With no Serena in sight, unfortunately, the betrayal apparently is more of the straw that broke the camel's back more than anything else. This seems to be something that's upsetting a lot of people, but to me, the relationship was not very sturdy to begin with. I really didn't think too much of the two of them dating. Action Man is honestly, in my opinion, being very generous, if anything, calling it puppy love. Because to me, it really was just, that first girlfriend where you realize, that, just because somebody, like he said, just because somebody's giving you attention doesn't mean that they're the love of your fucking life. You just got to rip that Band-Aid off and kind of just do you, which is what we're getting. I mean, I don't think that this means that we're not getting any more Serena in the Ventureverse. I just think that she was just a linchpin in the Venture Brothers being split apart, but she still exists in the Wide Whale angle of the story, unless Wide Whale won't be returning after his departure from the council. I mean, something we'll have to wait and see, but I think that they built him up a bit too much for him to just go away, and they built her up a bit too much for her to just go away. But either way, we are promised at the end of the credits that the Venture Brothers will indeed return, so we'll find out one way or the other. So, in saying that, we know that both sets of the Venture Brothers will be returning, since it is finally officially revealed that Rusty and Malcolm Monarch are indeed blood brothers. Whether it's half brothers, full brothers, we don't know yet, but it's discovered by Watch and Ward after they run tests on their blood, and seemingly reveal it to them after the Monarch has finally earned his moment of triumph, which is again marred by this, ending the season outside of the Meteor stronghold with his reaction of this less than exciting news. Well, in my humble opinion, I think that we have just witnessed the best season of one of the best shows to ever air on television. Starting with a bang that seemed like it would turn the future of the story on its head, only to sweep all these revelations that were big, crazy ones under the rug and go back to the story that ended so abruptly at the end of Season 6. In this, Newark, New York connection that was being established for the audience along with the OSI and the Guild. As I hinted in the beginning of this episode, this won't be the end for us either. I will be rewatching the 6th and 7th season in full to unpack this entire story. And I'm going to be starting from all this in Gargantua 2. So be sure to leave some comments on here of what you want to hear me talk about, creeps, because I want to know what you want to hear, and I want to give it to you. Well, until next time, creeps, I hope you've enjoyed following along with us as much as I've enjoyed giving this to you. Until I see you next, Doc out, creeps.